just to introduce myself, I'm Cydney Pickens. I'm the curator for this exhibition, and this is Layla Klinger.
Hi, hello. I made the things that Layla knows about. I'm not a Cydney place. Now I'm here. This is the show. Cydney curated it, and I'll hand it back to you.
So we're really excited to have a show that is so many different layers and such great talent. If you're kind of looking around, I don't know how familiar some of you are with the practice. All right, I'll try and really project. So,
just keep it close to your mouth. That really helps.
Okay, thank you. So, this exhibition is focused on bobbin lace in the many different forms that it takes. So, Layla, even though she was born in Tel Aviv, she's now based in Brooklyn, and she first got introduced to lace through the Brooklyn Lace Guild. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found them and your experience?
Sure, yeah. So, I've been making textiles for about 11 years now. And lace was the one thing that I haven't really delved into, but obviously I was curious because lace is stunning. And the textile scene, I think anywhere, is pretty small, so you get to know people. And I got to know this person who is one of the founders of the Brooklyn Lace Guild, who works also at the Met Museum textile collection, studying. And she was saying, oh yeah, we have the International Lace Day event, you should come. So they had an event for Lace Day, the two, by the way, contentious, why the two. And in the open Lace Day event, they had one examples of 17th century bobbin lace pieces that they just let me look at through a microscope, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. And then they had contemporary pieces, all kinds of tools that we have here, because I think lace makers always want to show off tools. And then they had a demo pillow, which I think is a big classic thing to have for a lace exhibition. And I was like, yeah, you can tie your hand at it, and they showed me the basic stitches. I thought it was witchcraft. So I didn't think it's actually possible to do it. I tried to do it, I managed to do a single pass of cross stitch, and it just looked unbelievable to me. And not that something that would actually produce such an intricate and mathematical object. And a year later, I found myself, COVID, quarantine, don't know what to do. How about I teach myself how to do bobbin lace? So I self-taught myself, and here I am.
Awesome. If you're anything like me, you probably didn't really know anything about bobbin lace when we got to this show. So it was a really big learning process for me. And of course, there's the history of a certain type of craft. What's really important to understanding is just kind of the basics of how do you do. So in this exhibition, I started off with this piece in the corner that is a work in progress, just so everybody can kind of see what the process looks like. So it starts with a lace pillow, which is going to be this backing that the lace is pinned to, and then the bobbins are helping to create tension as the lace process goes on. So directly across from it, we have some of the samples and some pages from Layla's journal, so you can kind of see a little bit about that. So are there any specific samples that you can tell us a little bit more about the making process, or maybe how one is made differently from another?
Sure, I will maybe speak about, I love all of them. I think I might speak actually about this one that's at the very edge. You might notice that all of them are black thread, this one is white. All of these are cotton, specifically Elizabeth number 40 or 80. But this one is metal. I'll do something that you shouldn't be doing, but I can because I made it. So you'll see that it bends and it will hold shape because it's actually a copper wire that's coated in this nice golden shade. And here I tried to do metal lace, which is quite hard. It is a thing that historically has been done, is being done nowadays as well by some practitioners, but it's very, very challenging, and actually you need to adapt your tools a little bit for it. So I adapted my bobbins slightly, but they need to look slightly different, and it also connects to a specific practice of, not exactly bobbin lace, but a variant of bobbin lace. Maybe I won't speak on that now, which is finding out, but we'll talk about it maybe a little later. But I was trying to explore this type of kind of secretive Jewish metal bobbin lace, Spaniel Arbeit, and stuff that's very, very hard. And this is not even close to the making of it. This is just a small sample, which made me realize I'm going to put a pin on that.
So, Layla talks a little bit about having to adapt the tools. So the traditional tools, the bobbins, usually look more like this, typically turned from wood. However, there's so many materials people have made them from historically. So there are some that are cast in metal. People have used bone or horns and carved those. It really just depends on the maker because each one has a different weight depending on the size, how it's carved. The way the string is spooled on it can be different depending on, what that person likes and the project that you're working on. So as we move in this direction, on this table you can kind of see examples from more historic commemorative bobbins, which are a really fun collectible example of tools. Not all tools have to be technically, they are functional, but not all tools are made to be used. So can you talk a little bit about the commemorative bobbins?
Yeah, sure. Commemorative is a very difficult word actually. So commemorative bobbins is actually a very traditional form of bobbins. And even in the earliest bobbins, we will see so many bobbins that are inscribed. So it will be for someone, for instance, you might have a name, you might have a phrase, or you might have like this whole long mysterious thing. I was telling the other day that there's commemorative bobbin for the execution of a husband who beat a wife who was a lace maker. So her lace maker friends made a commemorative bobbin in her honor when the husband was executed. So very dark things. But there's also anniversary bobbins. A very common one would be anniversaries of lace guilds. So most lace guilds, and there's a bunch throughout the US and the world, are very obsessed with lace and with themselves a little bit. So I have here the commemorative bobbin for the five-year anniversary of the Broken Lace Guild. That was last year. So we had Chris Parsons, who's an amazing miniature bobbin lace painter, very notorious in the UK. Paint two types of bobbins for us that a lot of us ordered for him. One is with, I don't know if you have seen the viral video of a rat carrying a pizza slice in the subway. So we have pizza rat carrying lace doily, and we have a pigeon with, instead of a bagel around, a laugh collar made from lace. And I have my partner over there commissioned for me to bobbins commemorating our two beautiful cats. So you can have all sorts of things, from executions to your cats, to your lace guild, and so on.
Yes, I really love the cat bobbins. I think they're super cute and really personal. The tools really reflect the maker. And so not only do we have the cat bobbins, but we also have these, which are a really important tool, are a little bit oversized because you started working on bigger and bigger projects. Lace often starts, with something kind of small, like a trim that you might see on a garment, but they're also really big. Of course, more time is taken when you're working on something on super large scale. But can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you made these?
Yeah, sure. So as we were talking about making your own tools, so what happens when you start experimenting with any kind of craft? At some point you realize that the tools that you have are limiting what you can do, and then you have to invent your own. And in this case, all of the works, spoiler, all of the works that are behind your bobbin lace, and I had to find a tool to make those, because as you can imagine, those small bobbins won't really make sense for these. So I thought, okay, let's make large bobbins. I actually experimented with a lot of things. And in the end, I realized, okay, I need something that's rather lightweight, considerably, because if I had something that was fully like stone or metal, it would be very heavy and maybe too heavy for me to handle. So I needed something quite lightweight. And I ended up thinking, what if I made silicone bobbins that looked like my fingers? I've never made anything with silicone, but it always looked fun. So I sculpted all of these figures. Each one is actually a slightly different one. I experimented with a bunch of them from clay. So I carved it a little bit. I used to do ceramics as a kid, so it threw me back. And then I popped them into alginate, which is an amazing material that also is pink, which is fantastic. It's biodegradable.
We love pink.
We love pink. And then I poured silicone into that, and it moved, and suddenly I had a bobbin. So they fling around, and they're actually a perfect size for the electroluminescent wire. So if I were to work with something that's bigger, I might use a bigger bobbin or a different material, but these were a perfect weight for me then. And also, I was constantly having my body reflected back to me as I was making, because I saw my fingers just moving around, flinging all the wires. So it was pretty nice.
And one of the really unique things that Layla and I bonded over is nails. I love to get my nails done, and Layla does all of her own nails. And so you'll see the long nails on the bobbins, and then you have some pretty great nails now, but the nails are sometimes part of the making process.
As you can see also on some of these bobbins. As you can see also on some of these bobbins, the 3D printed one with fingers, the big pair, I actually, when I had them done, I looked at it after it was done and thought it really needs some nails on it, so I painted with like a tiny brush with my nail polish and put it under the UV lamp. So it's actual nail polish, if you're interested to know.
So if anybody has any questions before we move on a little bit farther in the gallery, I'm opening the floor.
Have you ever worked with human hair to make lace? I saw that recently in a museum. Wreaths made of human hair.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Every time, I used to have very short hair, but now that I have long hair, it constantly falls out. I didn't know that's a thing with long hair. So every time I have like a long hair come, I'm like, should I keep that? Because I have seen human hair lace a little bit. I haven't done it yet, I would love to. It's extremely thin, and that's also the situation with it. It's very thin and it's not plied. Almost any thread that you work with for anything, weaving, knitting, lace, will be plied. So at least 2-ply usually, often 3-ply, and single hand, single filament. It's very, very delicate and fragile, so I would love to do it though at some point. Yes?
Are we, I just came 3-4 minutes ago, and I was wondering, have you gone over like technical aspects of this, or is that another phase?
No, we will go there, and you're in the right moment. We have not gone there yet, so.
Okay, so we'll talk about it later.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So there's one more piece I want to spotlight before we move into the light sculptures. On this reverse wall, so this piece was made specifically for this exhibition and also inspired the title Hot House. So this piece is actually not bobbin lace, it's needle lace, which is a different style of lace making using some of the same materials, but because you're not using the bobbins, it allows for a little more free-form creation where you can do things that are more narrative and kind of do a little bit more storytelling. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about this piece and why it's so significant to your practice in the show.
Yeah, thank you. So I've wanted for a long time to work with narratives for my own background, for my family. So my grandparents who passed away, my grandma passed away like 4 years ago, my grandma passed away like 10 years ago, and slowly I'm starting emotionally about them, because as you all probably know, you know your grandparents in a very certain way, and later on you discover they were also people with a very full life. And I guess if my grandparents were both Holocaust survivors, and after both of them passed away, my grandmother wrote a memoir about a certain time in the Holocaust where she and my grandfather were hiding. And I've seen it as a kid many, many times, but I never read it. And I decided to read it like about 1.5 years ago. I was like, okay, we're doing this. And also read my grandfather's Holocaust testimony for the archives, so both at the same time. And so they're both Polish, and they ended up both being in Warsaw during the war, and they had to get out of the ghetto and find hidings in different places. And one of the places they found themselves in was a bunker under a hothouse, which is also a term that I feel like I don't hear that often. Usually it'd be a greenhouse, but my grandmother keeps saying hothouse. We were under the hothouse, and we didn't see the sun, but we were under the hothouse. And they spent half a year hiding there with about 40 other Jews, including my great-grandfather, who did not make it. And about half a year into it, they were thinking, okay, this is suspicious. The Nazis are seeing a lot of food come in. We need to get out. It's a better idea to do that. And they went to hide behind a wall somewhere, actually, in some apartment. In a few days, a few weeks, maybe a couple weeks after they left to a different hiding place, the Nazis found out, someone ratted them out, probably, and they came and they killed all the Jews that were in hiding and the 2 people who were hiding them, so 2 Polish people who were not Jews, so Layla and his very kind nephew. And who all have like days planted after them. I don't know the term in English, but people who live by humanity kind of thing. So I made this lace, and I wanted to do something. Needle lace is a very narrative practice. There's a lot of beautiful examples of very, very painful things done in very beautiful needle lace. I kind of wanted to do that as well. So I have the hot house, and underneath that I have exactly 40 flowers for the 38 other Jews who killed her and Gardner and his nephew. And at the very top, blowing from the hothouse, there are two flowers, which are my grandparents who made it later on. And I'll say one last thing. My grandmother wrote the book, and it was published in Hebrew, in English, and in Polish. And each version is a little bit different. Krisha, by the way, the name of this was the nickname that they had for the hothouse, because it sounds like the name Christine, like the nickname for that, but also kind of like escape or something like that. I don't know Polish too also. So that's why that's the name. But when I was looking at the book in Polish, suddenly I see at the very end she has illustrations of what it looked like, and the illustration was kind of similar of just having this hothouse and then underneath a space identical to the size with staircases into it, and that's about that, which was a nice thing to find out. And I will actually be visiting the location of where this is at, because I have the address in a month from now, which is very moving for me.
Thank you for sharing. It's such a deep and important story, and it's really important that these stories are heard. There are people who are still living today who can tell these kind of stories, so it's really important to be able to represent that also through craft. There's so much culture attached to any craft, and this is the same. Even though bobbin lace is often kind of attributed to Italy, there is a lot of lace making practices that are attributed to other cultures as well, such as the Spaniard arbit that we were talking about. Let's move forward to that piece, and we'll see a little bit about that.
And at some point, I think after coming to the US, I was like, oh, I really am Jewish. What does that mean? And are there any Jewish textiles? So
How old were you when you moved?
I moved, first time I came, about 26, let's put it that way. So, which was very weird now being around all Jews for the first time, I think. And I emailed one of my old professors who's a textile historian and also Jewish, and I was not leaving because Jews lived in places, and actually each community had its own thing. But there's this one thing, Spaniard arbit. And Spaniard arbit is this really weird thing. I'm pronouncing it badly because it's in Yiddish. And it's a type of metal bobbin lace, but also not fully, that has been done specifically in Eastern Europe, specifically in the area that's now Western Ukraine. It's not been bombed yet, thankfully, but all the areas where it would have been done anyway were decimated in the Holocaust. But it's basically it's a type of ornamentation that you don't use as clothes, but you will usually use for religious purposes. So you'll have it as yarmulkes, like it's skull caps, and it's all gold, very intense, some precious stones as well. It doesn't actually look like lace at all, but it is made in a bobbin lace adjacent technique. It looks like bobbin lace, but real. And it is also made as a torot, which is the thing you would put on the tallit, the prayer shawls, but also maybe sometimes for secular purposes for women, which is really interesting. So it started out as judaica, but it's actually also for women as a modesty, as a worsted, which is a modesty plate for here. I don't know how having all gold ornamentation is on your chest is modest, but that's what it is. And it started around early 19th century, out of nowhere. No one knows where it came from. There's a lot of myths around it. And it's like, oh, this young Jewish mentor, whatever, came to this village with a silver thread in his pocket and set up a workshop overnight. Probably not. Probably happened otherwise. But no one fully knows. It was very secretive for a long time because it was only done by very religious Jews. And it was very popular. Some examples also came to the US because people commissioned them. But it got less popular because of labor struggles, actually. There were strikes in the Chicago outfit factories in Sassa. And as the Holocaust started, most of the Jews either escaped or were murdered. And so some people knew still how to do it, but because it was so secretive and was never documented, no one fully knew. So nowadays, I know of 2 people who know how to do it, who keep it pretty secretive. One is a rabbi, one is, I keep trying to go to his job and he's always not around. But it's so secret. I got obsessed with it and I really wanted to make it. I was trying to watch videos of it and people tried to understand how to make it. And at some point, I realized that I will never anyway make it because it's not for me to make. They don't want me to make it, and I don't want to make things that people don't want me to make. It's not, although my other side of my family is actually from that area specifically in Western Ukraine. Maybe they made it, maybe they had it, I don't know. But I was really interested in making things that are adjacent to it, that are connected to the aesthetics and the meaning of it, but are acknowledging that those are sacred objects, and I will never exactly make those. I will make my own sacred objects. So I started by doing the Middle East example we were talking about over there, and realized that's very hard, so I used the metallic thread here instead, and this is all bottomless as well. And I think that's what I have to say about this. So it's not Shkani Arbet, but it's Shkani Arbet adjacent.
Yes, it's really cool to be working with the same kind of material using different types of thread. I mean, we've seen you've used cotton, you've used polyester, and most interestingly, well, from my own opinion, would be the electroluminescent wire. And so I know that there's, the larger bobbins that you're using, but these pieces are not just about the lace patterns. They're also a bit about kind of the other big portion of your identity, which is being queer and queerness. So would you kind of walk with us into the rainbow spiral and talk a little bit about the conception behind this work and also some of the things that excited you about working this way?
Yeah, sure. So this actually was this moment that I made. I knew that as a big stage, I was like, yes, I'm going to take over it. So I had a gallery layout and designed it, and then it took some form. So maybe that I came up in as like a young queer person in Tel Aviv. And I think about the other physics is kind of aesthetic, which is weird life, they kind of tempt you in, which you can be whatever you want, but they also keep you inside. Once you're outside of it, that's kind of it. So it's both inviting you in, but also walking you in. And I think that's something I think about most of my work, something that's tempting, but also restricting. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this. I wanted something that, on the one hand, is really inviting, but then you find yourself inside of here and you realize you're kind of trapped in the lace. Even if it's beautiful, that's where you're at. In terms of the making of it, it might not be interesting to everyone about lace makers, but I do want to point it out that one of the things that I really love is really not just using lace as an afterthought, but I really love traditional bottom lace. So one of the most iconic rounds is a rose round, which you can work in many, many different ways, so the base pattern will look the same, and then depending on variations in stitches, it can look completely different. So all of these are actually the same pattern, and in each one I just change one stitch, and the pattern fully changes, but it's the same. If you look at the pattern and print it out, it's all the same, but you can make so much variation just from being really mindful and understanding what is happening. This is what happens if I do instead of a cross twist, well, I just cross twist. What happens? And these two also, okay, so we have these 3 pollinators. The middle one is a crochet, which is a little different. But this one over here and the far right one are both also a rose line. So it's very versatile, very canonic, and I really want them both to be very, very clear on one hand. But also very much for lace makers, because I'm so thankful for them for sharing off the knowledge through the centuries and nowadays with the internet and allowing me to learn it on my own and joining them. So yeah, always learning back to the lace manuals.
So the polymers are really interactive. So will you demonstrate how they work?
Sure, I will also say they have a style list of install them. Each one has its own personality, so we'll see what they want to be doing. This one actually has no touch sensors. They're very hidden, which makes some people really not have them, but no, it's gentle flowers. But basically, these are light sensors. There's about 6 in each one. They're meant to be discovered through engaging with your hands, sticking it into it, pollinating the flower with your own shade. Because ultimately all you're doing is just covering. So it's actually a pretty gentle touch, but so you don't even have to physically touch it, you just have to get close to it. I think because we're all standing here, there's less light and we're getting a little sensitive because of that. Again, they have personalities, but so yeah, they get activated through the body, basically. And when there isn't a body activating them, when there's enough, yes, are you good? Yes. When there's enough light, they go into the still mode, and they start getting very, very excited or agitated, up to you how you interpret it, as you go and activate through your body.
So what I've learned about these pieces is there is a very close connection to lace and cats. So like cats, sometimes they're in the mood, sometimes they're not. And you just have to kind of go along with what you're getting.
Yeah, 100%. And as those two, I had to keep the cats away. They would go into the studio and chew on. All of these have the same code ultimately, and yet each one reacts really differently. I don't know why, and I kind of gave up on trying to understand that, because I also think there's this conception of, okay, technology has to be this really predictable and reliable thing. I don't know, so far from what I've seen, I always have a hard time with technology, and it always seems to have a personality, and I'm just embracing and accepting it, rather than think that it has to conform to me. I've created something weird, and it's taken a life on its own, and I will just go with it. So, yeah, these are very agitated today, and usually those are the calm ones, and this one gets very shy and activated at the same time, so I think they're excited that there are so many people in the space.
Let's see this one.
Oh, should I activate it?
Yes. So this piece, the participant acts as part of the electrical current. So you have to be the conductor to complete the circuit. And you have to kind of play around with the different hand placements. So it's a bit of like a maze or a challenge to find which ones get it to react, which ones don't. So tell us a little bit about kind of how you made this piece.
Sure, so this was actually half of my pieces for my master's degree. I made this huge thing in my home. It was a lot of fun to do. And this piece, so you might be able to see we have this repeat pattern. So it's 3 different sections that are connected together, and all of these are based on a pattern that you can see the sample for it actually in the lace journal. It's called the Poem 2, and it's from Poem for Opera Nova, something like that, the poem, which is the oldest known lace pattern book, Bobbin lace pattern book, which was published in 1550, actually 7. I haven't read 1559, I think that's the 2nd edition, which I discovered later on, but that's the name we're going with it. So 500 years ago. And it's in conjunction also with another craft, which is printing. So that's why we suddenly have those books. And that's one that we know of, and it's fantastic. And all of it is Venetian braided laces. So it's all actually very, very simple techniques that just go in and out. But it's like braiding hair, just with a lot of ends, basically, and they intersect. So you have 4 going together and leading, coming together, leading, coming together, leading continuously. Which was very fun to work with this, because not all lace techniques will work. with electroluminescent wire, as I've discovered. Eastern European metal tape place really does not want to go in. So after I found the pattern, I adjusted it in both Photoshop and Rhino. I wanted to get a tape look to kind of adjust the original pattern but still be very true to the OG laces. Obviously slightly bigger than what it was originally, I would say. And then I connected all of the electroluminescent. I wire everything myself. I just want to know because it takes a long time. And this one has each section is 12 different ends. It's 12 pairs, meaning 24 ends, meaning 12 connections. So we have 36 individual ends over here, which means I don't have all the bolts are not fully individual as we're connected. Some are custom, but I put control each of these individually, which is quite nice. With my little sequencer rolls, as you see, I do my wiring over there as well, unfortunately myself. If anyone's an electrical engineer who wants to join me, I would love that. I hate doing it. And the thing that I really wanted to do for a long time, I was really interested a long time ago in electronic textiles or soft circuitry. And I thought, what a better time to do it than when I'm already learning so many other things. So I got this conductive thread, which is like any thread that you might have. It just happens to be coated with silver, which, as you probably know, is conductive. And you can mold it as you roll with anything else. It has slightly different friction, but overall. And I made these bottom laces on my pillow, on that style of pillow, actually the same exact size, just sitting in the park and lacing it and making these conductive laces. So these are all connected to the circuit. So what's happening here, we basically have an open circuit. We have 3 different sensors. This one is, I'm gonna get it, I can't get it. So we have the ones that are in the air. This turns out this is ground. We won't get into electrical class. And then we have what's grounding us, which is these 3. So if you try to touch 2 sensors together without a ground, nothing will happen. So you have to explore with your body. I really wanted, I really wanted to investigate what is it to explore physically with your body, especially at a time when I didn't really meet anyone. It was kind of sad. Exploring with your body, putting your hands through holes, lighting up as you're touching them. So it's not necessarily projecting clear porn at you, but the act itself is very, very sexual to me. Like me coming into holes and trying to find where should I touch and getting reactions to it, especially when it's this space is more lit up than usual, but I'm really thinking about very dark spaces where things are calling you and acting, and your body becomes a very significant part of the world. And it's also revealing that our body is also conductive because it's full of water. So we're not so separate from technology in a way. Technology is not so foreign to us. This is technology, real technology. This is tradition and technology. So yeah, just mixing everything up and making it kind of weird. Basically, I think that's my vibe generally. Make weird stuff.
Yeah. Bobbin lace is such a complicated practice on its own, but one of the great things that, helps Layla take her practice from being, traditional craft to also contemporary craft, which in the fact that it's made now is already contemporary, but she's also using a variety of different softwares and technology. You mentioned Rhino, but there's also some other programs and algorithms and computer words that she's using.
Yeah, so I constantly am trying to think how can I generate new lace patterns, because drafting lace patterns by hand would take a very long time, and I'm very crooked and I don't like using rulers, and we have computers. So I use a few different methods. So one would be Rhino. You can map patterns onto objects, so then you can see what would happen if you made a lace pattern over a sphere, for instance. Would it be workable? Not necessarily. So a lot of the stuff is experimental, and I try a lot of stuff that fail. I would say like 50% of the things that I try fail. Another thing that I work with is ground forge and plugin for Inkscape that my lace idol, Veronica Alban, who's a mathematician, who did her math PhD in bobbin lace, which is pretty amazing. She wrote a formula or algorithm, I don't know lace, I think, math, I think that's the name for it, that generates over 5 million new bobbin lace gowns or repeat patterns because it's so math-based that you can just continuously generate more, which some of them are not fully workable, but some are very, very much are. And I've seen beautiful examples of people trying to work her lace. So the 3 pollinators, for instance, are fully thanks to her contributions to the advancements of lacing technology. This is through her plugin for Inkscape, which is a free software. And she made it so that we can generate polar lace gowns, which again, very difficult to do on your own, even using Rhino and Illustrator and all of that. Really difficult because they're not fully mentored. And you can design your own pattern in Groundhog, which again is a real experimental platform, and then throw them into the plugin and make many different varieties of the polar laces. So I played around with these. I generated like at least 100, I think. A lot of them I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Let's try a new one. And then I ended up making a few of these in thread. None of them are on the wall here because I continuously take them out, and also they took so long. Even documenting it was difficult. But I made a few of these in thread and then realized, okay, I think actually it will be easier in this format, and it was, surprisingly enough. But yeah, the lace community is very, very generous overall, and really likes to share very abundantly, which is beautiful, and I owe a lot to all of the other lace makers who have taught me a lot, including the one that who just, by the way, DM'd me today. I was like, looks beautiful, and it got really yay! Yes.
So, even though this is a solo show and she's doing a lot of the work herself, like a great album, there are some notable features. So we've had some other people who've done some of the carving for the bobbins. We had Chris Carson who's doing the painting for some of the bobbins, but we also have this great video projection piece that I'd like you to talk a little bit more.
Sure. So, a good friend of mine who I've lived with on and off in different cities around different countries, Elisheva Galba, who's a fantastic person. And she used to be a curator, and now she became an artist herself, and she's specifically a photographer. Her background, she comes from a Hasidic Chabad family, if anyone knows what that is. They're very religious like Jews. Her dad's a rabbi. And now she's gay, like myself. And we're very good friends, and we wanted to collaborate together. We got this opportunity to create something for the Jewish Museum in New York. There was an exhibition in response to something that was happening there, and we kept talking how something but documentary but not can relate to each other, and how do our practices relate to each other. And really came to the thought about fragmentation, because she's constantly collecting fragments. So in her photography, she has on one hand the community that she grew up in that she comes to as an outsider, and also she takes a lot of focus of her friends. I think I might be in some of these on my hand somewhere, and she dresses that look between religious to no Renaissance to sick, but still herself at the same time. So she has all of these weird fragments, and lace is fully a fragmented work, right? So I think it's a work that's defined by having holes in it. If it doesn't have holes, it's not lace. So lace, by definition, is voided. And by playing with the electroluminescent wire, I am able to constantly remove and add light. So removing parts of the world and adding them, so fragmenting continuously and making unstable worlds. And the connection between instability and fragmentation in grievance felt like a good match between us. And we came up with this work, and she did the projection mapping. I did a scrap lace. So it's again based on ground fault, so you can create fractal lace, which is really amazing to generate more of it. I think the woven pillow was actually a study for this one. This is slightly more simplified than that one, but it's the same exact idea of the thing repeating itself endlessly, but also then having pieces constantly being removed, added, removed, and added. That's what I have to say about this one.
Awesome. Well, Layla, thank you so much for sharing so many different things about your work. It has been a real joy to work with Layla. There's so many different ways to find new artists to do exhibitions with, but randomly I was scrolling through Instagram through Lace Challenge 2022, the hashtag, and after going through so many entries, most of them living in Russia, I found Layla's account. So I DM'd her, and then from there we started this relationship maybe about a year ago, so maybe a little bit more than a year ago.
Yeah, like a year and a bit, a year and like a few months. Yeah.
Yes, so we've been working back and forth. If you look at the labels, a lot of these works were created while we were having these discussions, so some of them have not been shown before, which is always kind of exciting to reveal work that nobody has seen yet. So I just really enjoyed this process. I thank you for being here with us, helping to install. A big shout out to our install team, Joan Reyes, who's not Tiffany Nesbitt, Sarah Darrow, who's our curator and exhibitions director. So we've had a really great team.
An extreme shout out and thank you to Cydney, who has been fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy. So shout out to Cydney.
Thanks everyone. So now we're going to open up to any more questions. So, do I see any hands? Liz?
Have you thought about, you were talking about the math, or person that studies math and the fractals and all that. Have you thought about incorporating AI into that in terms of generating images? Whether it's like what feminism is or isn't, or queerness or any of that stuff?
Yeah, I'm super freaked out by AI, but I'm also very intrigued by it. I actually, a little while ago, I was like, what if I tried to do it? I tried to sign on to Midjourney and do that, but it was like too many people are trying to. So I'm gonna try again at some point. But definitely, my partner was somewhere here, I don't know where they're at, but was sending me some AI-generated laces. They're not exactly bottomly, so it is freaky. It looks like, but it's not. But it would be definitely interesting and really freaky. So.
Yeah, it's freaky and interesting to see like what the perception is of what's else there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, what does AI suggest as patterns for bobbleheads, and what do they come out as? Which I'm going to assume are going to come out like when you see an AI generated photo and suddenly you notice the person has no ears, or has like a nail coming out of here. So I think the lace is going to come out kind of like that, and I'm super excited to do that. I will at some point, definitely. Yes.
What coding languages do you use to program? Are these like Raspberry Pis or anything like that? Do you use that?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention, my dad's an electrical engineer and he helps me write code and I inject sequences into it, but he lives far away so I have to do most of the stuff, but he does all the code and it's C++. So these are programmed in the electroluminescent software. These are not Raspberry Pis, they are EL sequences, that's their name. They are no longer being manufactured, which is very bad. I actually tried to find more because I fried some to my board and they don't sell anymore in the US, Canada, Europe, India, or I think in Australia and Singapore as well, some, but TBD. So yeah, these are made by Sculptor. Well made. They don't have anymore.
Any more questions?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the scarlet work and the black work pieces and like how they inform this other work.
Sure, yeah. I'll go over here. As you might have seen, actually, she is something also embroidering technically lace. So before I ventured into lace, I actually ventured into lace because I was doing blackboard, which is this type of embroidery, which is a counted type of embroidery, usually on linen. For about 3 years, I was doing it almost every day, and I kind of couldn't do it anymore. That's how I started lace. Nice. But the amazing thing about blackboard, so blackboard was really popular in like 16th century England, and one of the reasons it was popular, one, it's beautiful, but second, it looks kind of like lace, and it's way cheaper to make than lace. So you'll see it, most of the blackboard examples we have nowadays are actually photos. We don't have a lot of historical examples of it, but you'll see it in a lot of portraits. You'll see it mostly around the neck and around the wrist, exactly where you would see lace usually. Very rarely will you see it on a full garment, and if it is, it's like on Queen Elizabeth kind of vibe. So that's in terms of relationship to lace of these patterns are almost like fake lace. Specifically what I do is not actually black open way. It is technically, but also not, because what I do is, first of all, I have two colors, and black one has to be one color, whether it's black or not. I can be red one or scarlet one, this is scarlet one. But I was brought from Slavic red one, where things that were made around when my family was at look at, like with these specifically, so it's more cross stitch in red, black, and white. So white background and the red is the blood. And all of these are portraits of myself, my ex, partner, little long distance. So I was trying to do literally slow things to elongate the images that they would send over, because that would make it last longer than how fast we go over the images nowadays. I'm like, what if I stitch it in the slowest way I know how to reproduce an image? And I thought at the time black book was very, very, very slow. I discovered lace is slower, and I think that's why I ventured into it. But needle lace is definitely the slowest thing, and I already have a piece of walking on at the moment. So. Yeah, but slowness is definitely a connective thread.
Where do you see your work within current, let's say, feminism or female conversations, whatever you want to, call that? How do you see your place?
Yeah, in the past, I would say 15 years or so, we see a lot of resurgence of fiber out in, it's very political, but political and feminist and queer way. And I've definitely been really informed by it. And I really want to take part in that narrative and canon. And I think especially seeing it from the outside, I didn't have a lot of visual exposure to it because there wasn't anyone who was doing that. There's like maybe one nowadays, which is nice, and then coming to New York suddenly I saw all my favorite artists work, and like, that's what I want to be at, and how the work felt so important to me. Like on one hand, very feminist and very queer, or one or the other, not necessarily both at the same time, but also really loving of craft. So not apologizing for wanting to be a weaver, and not apologizing for being working in ceramics or whatever it is, really loving the matter, loving the technique, and not being like a postmodern artist who's like, I hate this actually, but I want to get this imagery, and textiles are soft, that means femininity, but I don't actually respect textile makers. So yeah, I think the combination of really being a maker, but also an artist who's not exporting it, outsourcing it to someone else, which for me is really important also in terms of feminist practice. The people who I know who is, well, are always men. So yeah.
Thank you.
I love what you were saying about how race is boys. And I was thinking about the title of the show as well as your family history, and how often boys and feminization kind of come in conversation with people's history. So can you talk about the role of body and interaction in that living space? Some of the larger groups?
Yeah, sure. Definitely, I think a lot about queer bodies, feminist bodies, bodies who have been voided constantly throughout history nowadays still. And the lace installations for me, I call them lace bodies. So it's an interaction between the flesh body and the lace body. It's kind of like meeting up a reflection in a way and feeling seen. And also seeing something that on one hand is defined by having holes, but it's still very much intact. And that's the amazing thing about lace. It's a structure that's really defined by having holes, but it's always intact. The structure has integrity to it. The holes are integral to it. It's an amazing, it's very resilient in its delicacy and softness. And for me, it really reflects the queer and feminine body. So yeah, it's kind of a reflection of seeing yourself in queer, but also in beauty and in resilience.
All right, I think that's a good place to end. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for the
Thank you, everyone.